Welcome to Crossover the Pond, brought to you by 21 Media Productions and Sports Social. He's Drew Lasker, I'm Josh Sexton, and this is another episode as we continue our NBA basketball journey, a short hezzy tween and stutter step away here in the UK. Lots to get into this week. We're going to talk about the teams who've bought into their youth and are thriving right now. Can you win it with kids? We're going to ask that question and answer it potentially in this episode without actually knowing what happens at the end. But we love bold predictions on here, don't we? We're going to talk about our bold predictions from last week at the end. Some mixed results for both me and Drew. But we're also going to talk about the awards races because they're all hotting up right now. And I've got some public service broadcasting to do in terms of games left versus odds because I don't see that in many places. So stay tuned for all of that. But before we get into all of that, the most important question I have to ask is, Drew, how you doing, my man?
Man, like I keep saying, it's the meat and potatoes. I'm feeling energetic. I don't know about your part of the town, but in the Northeast, the sun is beginning to shine. It's starting to be a little bit more daylight when you wake up in the morning. And so that energizes you after late nights watching the NBA. But, how about, the Spurs and Philly turning it back, man? We must start there because I grew up a huge fan of Michael Jordan, and my draw in the NBA was the whole package. It was the superstars, but also it was a lot to do with the production as well. The way that the NBA was broadcasted. Like I had my favorite guys that I love to listen to, Marv Albert. He just made you want to be inside the game. And then last night they brought in the three presenters, Bob Costas with Mike Fratello and Doug Collins, and all we were missing was my guy. But it was great to see the throwback scoreboard and all of that. I love what NBC did last night.
Yeah, it's strange for me really because my coverage was always kind of different. I think I've mentioned on podcasts before that part of the reason I fell in love with the NBA is because it was on terrestrial TV over here, but I'm sort of too young to remember the kind of glitz and glamour around that. I remember that when I was like getting back into the NBA as an adult, I was watching it a lot on League Pass, and League Pass sometimes just replicates the TV stream, especially if it's on like NBC or whatever. And I kind of remember the tune of NBC when I was probably started watching it back in like 2013 or whatever it was. That still like rings through my mind now. There's the meme that was going around of like all the different people dancing to it and stuff at the time. Because it was really like a nostalgic time of the NBA, that when like the Warriors were in their prime, LeBron was in his prime, everything just felt rosy in the garden. That's what nostalgia tends to do, isn't it, Drew? It just makes you feel good. And when the sun's shining like it is in Liverpool right now as well, as you say it is in Newcastle, it just does bring that warm feeling back to you.
Yeah, most definitely. And the NBA is just really heating up. I mean, how about Cleveland beating Detroit without Donovan Mitchell last night? That really impressed me. Detroit, obviously the number one seed in the East. They've been on a run, and we talked about it here before about the James Harden impact. And impact is the key word because you look at his stats, you look at the box score from last night, doesn't blow you away, but you watch the final highlights and it's him, making the final play to close things off and what he's done to that team. That's a team that we have to really keep an eye on. I've already mentioned it before. They have everything. I love the front line of Mobley and Allen, so they have size there for the playoffs when the game slows down to be able to protect the paint. But then you have Mitchell, who you can unleash. You can foresee a couple of 30 and 40-point games in the playoffs because he could focus on strictly that. Because in the playoffs, your stars are more involved offensively, but then you have a closer as well. As long as it's not a game seven and a trip to the NBA Finals, I'm believing in James Harden.
Yeah, absolutely fair enough. I'm the same, and like doing it all on a broken hand as well makes it even more impressive. Really, like you say, the stat line doesn't jump out. I think it's because it's kind of like a James Harden stat line. He's always going to be a heavy turnovers guy because he's a heavy usage guy as well. But the 7 assists in there, 5 rebounds. He's shot tour dates for most of the season. But like I was saying it when he was a Clipper earlier in the season, like you don't need to pay attention to the shooting percentages for me with James Harden because the more the volume goes up with him, the more those percentages percentages are likely to fall. But as you say, big shots down the stretch, big plays down the stretch, even big three free throws. You know, of six from the free throw line. He's always going to be able to get to the free throw line. I want to shout at Dennis Schroeder as well, by the way, because everyone's kind of focused on the Harden pickup for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but Dennis Schroeder off the bench has been really leading that bench unit in terms of scoring as well. Does it again with 15 points last night, 60% from the field, 67% just shy of from three. So Dennis Schroeder really getting it done too, and kind of shows you what the Detroit Pistons may be missing. You know, obviously Duncan Robinson is someone they've put a lot of faith in this season. Goes 2 of 5 from three last night, which is probably kind of what you'd expect from Duncan Robinson. He's definitely a bit more, you know, shy from field goal percentage. But Cade Cunningham has a quiet night, and that's the trouble with Detroit is if Cade Cunningham has a quiet night in the playoffs, and they're one of the worst half court offense teams in the NBA as well this season, are they going to be able to ride that out in the playoffs? And for me, there's still not enough shooting there really to say that they are, Drew.
You're absolutely right. That's what worries me about Detroit. I love their physicality, their defense in the paint, their
Yep.
toughness, tenacity. That all translates to the playoffs. But at the end of the day, you need that game changer. And if they're able to take away Cade Cunningham, I look at the roster. I don't see that one player that can take over a game. Obviously, Jalen Duren has had an all-star type season, but he's not a guy that you're going to rely on for a 30 ball that can take it home. Whereas when you look at Cleveland, we both can foresee Dennis Schroeder winning you a playoff game, right? Like just coming off the
Mm.
bench, just being, just having one of those heaters and mixing it up, and you can see that. And that is the thing that concerns me. I don't see a secondary ball handler, a secondary scorer, a secondary bucket getter for Detroit. And that is the part that worries me about them, along with the 3-point shooting percentage as well. They don't shoot it very well from the three. Kevin Herter is still yet to get into the rotation yet. He didn't play, got a DNP last night, so which is really surprising because I'm not sure why Bickerstaff wouldn't be trying to see what you have going into the playoffs, because you're going to need them because teams are going to pack the paint and Detroit just doesn't shoot it well enough. So, yeah, those are the concerns about Detroit, but Cleveland, they got everything, man.
Yeah, and I guess the other interesting matchup from the Eastern Conference side of things and from contention side of things is the Knicks and the Raptors last night too. I'm kind of like I'm enjoying the Raptors regular season. I think, you know, similar to Detroit, they've got a lot of things that translate well to the playoffs. I'm still not really buying much stock in them in the playoffs, to be honest. I can see how they finish in like a tricky seeding pairing as well. Like if they come up against the Cavs and it's the 4-5 matchup, I just think the Cavs come out of that pretty comfortably. But New York getting a good win with a 16-2 late run as well. I've got so many concerns about the Knicks. They were actually my pick to come out of the East going into the season. I think I'm now firmly in the Celtics camp, to be honest. And like, you're going to struggle to find a way to persuade me to talk me out of the Celtics, especially with James Harden's broken hand, even though he's not showing many effects of that in a direct sense. I think it's the sort of thing that like Luka Doncic always used to come into the playoffs beat up, and it would always show up over the course of the playoffs. And that's kind of the way I can see it going with Harden, who's had a really taxing season for both the Clippers and the Cavs. Yeah, the Knicks for me, I'm still not just buying too much stock in them, Drew. I'm not sure how you're feeling about them.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the NBA just posted, when you look at their standings, they now have a playoff picture, which is nice because it gives
I
you an
like that when that
idea.
comes into play. Yeah.
Very, very nice. It
It's also
eliminates
nice.
all.
It's nice that it does it in March when you got the March Madness bracket, the NBA bracket. You just bracketing your head off.
It is absolutely perfect. I love it. And you're going to see that shifting regularly. So, right now, if the playoffs ended today, the Knicks would play the 76ers. And the Celtics, their opponent remains to be seen because they're the second seed. And obviously, you got to do the play in. But let's say that the Magic beat the Heat in a play-in game, which you can absolutely foresee. They would face the Celtics. And you mentioned your concerns about the Knicks specifically meeting against the Celtics. Let me turn and ask you this, right? Who is more likely to lose in the first round? The Knicks versus the 76ers or the Celtics versus the Magic?
I think the Knicks for sure. Like the Sixers are a team that,
Really?
yeah, I think the Sixers are a team that me and you said could upset a couple of people in the playoffs. I honestly don't see a team in the play-in that troubles the Celtics. I think Celtics are that good.
Wow. Wow. See, I see it the other way around. I mean, the
All
76ers
right.
right now, if was a fifth, we would all be drunk. But the thing is that the 76ers is just too many asterisks, right? What
Mm.
is Paul George going to look like? Is Embiid going to be healthy? All of these things. If they're able to put that all together, absolutely, I can see them beating the Knicks. But right now, under certain circumstances, I can't see it. Obviously, they got waxed by the Spurs last night. But the Celtics, the Magic are one of those teams that we have to look out for, and we've talked about this. They're up and down, they're inconsistent, but when they put it all together, I believe they could beat the Celtics because I believe the Celtics are sooner or later that magic, no pun intended, is going to run out and they're going to run out of juice. And I would not be shocked to see an upset in the first round.
Yeah, maybe I'm too high on the Celtics. I think I've just seen like enough of a sample size now this season. Like they've done it without Jalen Brown. Like all the questions you can kind of throw at the Boston Celtics so far, I feel like they've stood up to them and answered them. And a lot of the questions we've asked of the Orlando Magic this season seem to just keep recurring. Like they're picking away. And I know they're a good defensive team. Again, like there's a health asterisk there with them though. Like is Franz Wagner going to be fit coming into the playoffs, fit and healthy? Is Paolo Banchero even going to be fit and healthy coming into the playoffs? Jalen Suggs. It feels like there's just a couple too many of those questions for me, but I'm particularly interested, Drew, to flip into our first sort of real topic of this, to look at the other side of the play-in tournament, because the Charlotte Hornets right now are flying. They win another game against the Dallas Mavericks last night. There's going to be a lot of chalk, I think, to finish the season. I could kind of see, to be honest, the way the Eastern Conference could shape up to be chalk once that play-in is decided. But the Charlotte Hornets are on an absolute roll right now and probably the most fun team in the league to watch. I think most people sort of believe that at this stage. And again, when I talk about the fact that the Boston Celtics are able to get it done without Jalen Brown, the Charlotte Hornets have been able to get it done without LaMelo Ball a lot of times this season as well. But when LaMelo Ball has had off nights where he's just shot a little bit less whenever he's been off the court, that combination of Brandon Miller, of Concaneppel, of Musa Diabate even at the five, and now and Kobe White, sorry, I should say, as well, has just been really getting it done for Charlotte, and they're such an exciting team to watch. And I'm like licking my lips at the idea of them playing Detroit in the first round. I still think Detroit will come out of that matchup, but what can Charlotte take away from Detroit in that matchup that means that Detroit end up getting washed in the second round? I think there's a lot of things.
That's a fair point. If you're Detroit, you're hoping that Orlando or the Heat or the Hawks fall into that eight seed because I feel like they can beat all three of those teams up.
Yeah.
The Hornets, on the other hand, is one of those teams that is playing with house money, playing for the future. This is a wash year. We all know that, right? LaMelo is one of those guys that can hit 8 threes and get on a heater. Canepo, we've already talked about him many times on this podcast. If you're Detroit, you don't want to get into a scoring race with Charlotte because Charlotte can outscore you. So I would be very concerned. And right now, the way that they're playing, eh, and that is a scary opponent to play when they come into the playoffs and they have absolutely nothing to lose. I've been in that situation before and went off to win the playoffs being in that situation. And Charlotte is one of those teams that you got to think they're for real. And at first you could say, yeah, they're just on a little riding a little wave, but at the moment, again, they lost. They're on another streak, 5 winning streak this time. And keep your eyes open for Charlotte.
Absolutely, and some really legit guys there. Like we talked about the Kobe White pickup and how we thought that was a sneaky good pickup for them, and so it's proven really. Like he's been majorly impressive. Someone who like gives you a bit of insurance for LaMelo Ball because LaMelo Ball is just unpredictable. If he's having a real off night in the playoffs, assuming that they do get there, you could see how Kobe White comes in and gives you a cool 20 without even really flinching or breaking a sweat. Like I'm such a big fan of Kobe White, and I heard it mentioned on the Bill Simmons podcast the other day as well. Like I kind of forgot about this. He's a UNC guy, so like him being back in Charlotte, North Carolina, is such like a nice little sort of bow to that story as well of a really good pickup for the Charlotte Hornets. So a lot going for them right now. I'm praying for that first round matchup between them and Detroit. I know it means that they can't keep ascending from this point because they are in dangerous territory of like exceeding Orlando or Miami in those playing spots, but assuming that they can stay there, that first round match with Detroit, there's going to be a lot of scrappiness, a lot of beating each other up going on. Hopefully more so on the court than off the court, as we saw in the last game, a lot of sort of brawling between those two teams, but a real grudge match which potentially shapes up. But there's another team that you mentioned there, Drew, the Atlanta Hawks, who is the other one in the East that I'd say has really sort of bought into their youth. And I know it sounds like, trading Trae Young away on the face of it for CJ McCollum doesn't seem like they're buying into their youth. But if you kind of read deeper into that, like every young team needs a veteran leader, and CJ McCollum can be that and will excel in that role. He's been ahead of the Players Association before and all these different kinds of things. I think he really excels in a role where he can kind of be tutoring down to young guys. But in buying into that youth, I think you've seen Jalen Johnson really take a step up, albeit, he's been stepping up over the course of the whole season. But there's a couple of other guys on that roster who I've been really impressed with in terms of making that step up. Onyeka Okongwu was someone who, people were really high on coming out of the draft and didn't necessarily get done for the first few years for Atlanta, but is really starting to step up this season as well. And I just think there's a lot to like about this Atlanta Hawks roster, Drew. And I don't think they're the kind of team that can be a playoff disruptor necessarily, but with a coach like Quinn Snyder, I think the sky is the limit for this team.
And you didn't even mention Kuminga, and I didn't even realize Buddy Hield's on the team as well. Like, this team has a lot of guys, right? A lot of guys that could step in at any moment. Like Buddy Hield, I haven't kept a close eye on Atlanta, but I would assume he's not really in the rotation. But he is a piece that you could throw in there. He can get hot. You didn't even mention, the number one draft pick. He's had his up and downs, but they picked him number one for a reason. So hopefully there's something there. Alexander Walker as well is having a great year. Yep. This team is just littered with players, and I keep saying it, you need youth, length, and depth. And Atlanta seems to have all of those boxes ticked. I would like to see them fall out of the playoffs and get one more draft pick, but Kuminga has been on a mission. I mean, all you had to do, Steve Kerr, was just let him eat. Let his family go up there for seconds. You guys in Golden State is being stingy with the food, but Atlanta, they're saying, here, we got a 50 platter of wings for you, my friend. And he is paying them back with this play because since he's come back from injury and made his debut, he's been playing very well. So you got to you mentioned Trae Young there, but I mean, we all knew it, like at 6 foot. That run he had to the Eastern Conference Finals many years ago, that was Atlanta Hawks ceiling with a Trae Young-led team, right? He's just too small. He's too inconsistent from the three, and he's targeted in the playoffs. And now this team has a point guard who is 6'9", Jalen Johnson. So it's a totally different trajectory for the Atlanta Hawks in their future.
Yeah, interesting as well. The one game that that Jonathan Kuminga starts is actually his worst game as a Hawk so far as well. He's been much better coming off the bench. So, more for Steve Kerr there. I enjoyed you talking about the wings. I was wondering if they're lemon pepper, Drew, after this, if you've seen this Magic City Heritage Night or whatever they're calling it.
Well, what's your thoughts on that? Because is it Cormat from the Spurs? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, Cornet, yeah.
He is opposed to it. And then I seen someone else chime in as well saying they were against it. Like, what are your thoughts on it? Being from the outside looking in, being from the UK across the pond, and I'm assuming not having a huge education on the entertainment business. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I've been to the ATL once. I can't say I did make it to Magic City in the end, though. An invite was extended late night in a bar once. I decided to retire back to my hotel dorm instead. But I think there's probably two sides to it. It's probably Atlanta's kind of way of pointing towards a culture that exists in their city and deciding that there is meant to be an inclusive, feeling to all of this. I kind of take Luke Cornett's point in that it's like a family business and stuff like that, but also within this family business, there's going to be some things that aren't necessarily safe for family. It's still people's lives and jobs and things on the line. We literally talked about that Detroit and Charlotte brawl before and how me and you were kind of into that stuff and those guys showing fight, but it's not the sort of thing you'd want your kids to be sat courtside at, is it really? So I think there's always going to be bits of this that are up and down. I saw David Aldridge's piece for The Athletic on this where he kind of said like Magic City is not just about, the adult entertainment business. Basically there is a music scene that spawned out of Magic City, and the way that ATL hip hop came around is due to a lot of the sort of music that was around the time of Magic City as well. And I think for my money, Atlanta's probably one of the best cities for hip hop in the US right now. So I could kind of go either way on it, and I'm going to cede to people with better knowledge of the situation like David Aldridge. So I'm kind of happy to hand it over. What do you think though, Drew?
The NBA is in bed with beer companies. They're in bed with gambling companies. I would not be shocked in 5 years they get in bed with marijuana companies as well. We already know that the NBA doesn't test for it anymore, and that is a lucrative $1 billion business currently in the States. So don't be shocked by that. Sin is sin, right? What's the difference? It's a tough one because from the outside looking in, if you don't understand it, I can see where you can wrestle with this. But I'm from Houston, and Houston is one of the capitals, along with Atlanta, on strip clubs, right? And I am not a strip club guy. I've never been a strip club guy. However, I have gone to the strip club just to go eat after a club. The food in entertaining mid business or strip clubs is incredible. So, and even when I started to go to Atlanta, and we know about the Houston strip club culture, everybody knows about how much James Harden loved it during his time there. It is a completely different level in Atlanta. Like it's just a hangout. It is like going to the bowling alley. And that's when it really changed my perspective that the women are included in this. Like women will go and hang out. And so I remember when I took my wife to Atlanta, and we have some family friends there, and it was a big group of us. We were all trying to figure out where to go. And they mentioned a strip club, and I saw my wife is British, by the way. She looked at me kind of funny, and I was like, this is what they do here. And she came out of it, and now her perspective's changed. She's like, it's like going to the bowling alley. So I don't see it as a big deal. Like sin is sin. You can criticize all of these MLB, NFL, all of these major leagues and who they get in bed with. It just is what it is. We understand what it is. It's about money at the end of the day. There's a lot out there, and so that's why a lot of these businesses are going in these directions. And what are kids not exposed to these days, right? Like everything is just out there. So it's not that big of a deal to me personally.
No, I agree. And I'm definitely with your wife, by the way. Like in Britain, I think the strip club culture is so different because they're basically traditionally gentlemen's clubs here. So it's basically upper middle class, seedy white men who spend most of the
Yeah.
time in strip clubs in the UK. Whereas it was actually a girl that I was dating at the time in Atlanta who said, "Should we go to the strip club?" And I was like, I don't really mess with that kind of stuff. So I was doing that, but I've heard that the food, the lemon pepper wings, is good there. At least it got Lou Williams to break COVID protocols to go there, and I'm nothing if not a huge Lou Williams fan. But we'll flip over from that little tangent we were on there, Drew, to talk about awards. I've just been checking because I had to kind of update the stats that I sent to you from the other night for this. We meant to record yesterday, but a few technical issues meant that we couldn't. So a couple of games have happened since then. So for MVP, Shea versus Jokic. The OKC Thunder have played 52 games now. I put 51 on that, meaning that there are... Shea has played 51 games, but there are 19 games left for the OKC Thunder. So Shea, I think, is probably going to pass that 65-game mark with flying colours. It'd be interesting to see, really. He does miss the game against the Bulls last night, so, potential there, really, that he may have another injury. I've not actually seen much into that current injury or what his sort of status is, but, maybe there is a chance that Shea gets a bit close to that 65-game mark. For Jokic, it's a lot more interesting. The Denver Nuggets have played 45, have 21 left. Jokic played 25. The Denver Nuggets have 21 left. So there's a lot to sort of dissect between those two, Drew. I'm kind of wondering now, like that people are saying that Cade has kind of entered the playoff picture there. Because of how Shea has been struggling with injuries, but I kind of think this is a wash for Shea if Jokic ends up falling below that 65 game thing, and if he doesn't, it's going to be a much more close race, and I'll probably still just have Shea edging it. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, both of these guys are one injury away from being out of the picture, which would be a tragedy. You know, but in reality, I don't have a problem with Cade. His numbers aren't, to these guys level, but no one saw this happening with Detroit, and he's the best player on the number one seed in the East that's been consistent all year. But let's just stay on topic and focus on both of these players, and let's assume that both players will be healthy and make it through. I think sometimes a lot of times is what have you done for me lately, and that's where the talk is kind of cooled off on Shea because his start to the season was so incredible that there was nowhere to go but down for him, and obviously the injury kind of slowed that momentum down. He's the best player on the team. He controls the tempo. He closes games down the clutch. But then if you look at Jokic, and it's just really hard to argue his impact. That's the difference where I see these guys is impact with Jokic and the delivery from Shea. And it could be a toss up, but I think right now I would just have to go with Shea from just the consistency. Like if you dive all into those deep geeky numbers, it's Shea, and I'm not gonna go into all that. I'm just gonna go strictly on the eye test. And this is will be my closer, is that we know how difficult it is to repeat in the NBA. No one has repeated in 7 years. And right now, Shea has OKC Thunder on trajectory to do that. And it would have been easy for them to come out and have a hangover after last year's success and accomplishments. But he came out and he's better than last year in pretty much every category. So for me, it will be very difficult for me to choose against Shea.
Yeah, I was just trying to look into what this latest injury is because I've not actually seen that because he was back on the injury report for the Chicago Bulls game after 2 games back. It doesn't seem like it's anything particularly serious. It seems like it's just sort of part of the ramping up, and maybe they decided to sit him for the Bulls game because the Bulls are losing heavily right now. So absolutely fair. I kind of want to polish up on those numbers I said before. So Shea, 51 played, 19 left. Jokic, 46 played, 20 left. So yeah, Jokic right on the line of that. Assuming that he plays all 20 that are left, he'd be at 66 games. But as you say,
Wow.
Drew,
Only one
Shea is.
game he can
I
miss.
know exactly. So he's gonna have to really be in there. But to be honest, like even from Denver's point of view, like Denver are in a bit of danger right now. Like they've just won that game last night, but they are falling into that trap of being a bit too close to the Lakers, a bit too close to the Phoenix Suns. There, I say as well. Only a couple of games back from the Denver Nuggets. There are the Phoenix Suns. So Denver needs to be careful. Like I understand that it's all about getting healthy for the playoffs and stuff, but they are in a really tricky situation right now. And for me, that has to count towards MVP voting. It's a regular season
Of
award.
course.
Shea is on the best team over the course of this regular season, and so I'm with you, Drew. I think Jokic needs to make sure that he's lifting Denver a lot over this next few weeks heading into the playoffs. Otherwise, they're going to be too out of rhythm, and suddenly they're going to go from being one of my favorite contenders to someone who I'm looking at being like they could be a sneaky little first round exit or something here.
Yeah, 10 games behind the Thunder, 38 wins, Nuggets, 48 wins, OKC. You can't give that award to Joker unless he some way, somehow closes the gap and get them within a game or two, which you can't see happening. And right now, the Nuggets are the fifth seed. And when all things were equal at the beginning of the season, OKC was just a better team. So for that, I have to go with Shea for MVP.
Yeah, absolutely fair. We'll move on to DPOY, where Wemby is Wemby has played 47. I'm always getting the order of these confused. I should have literally put what the team was next to it. So Wemby has played 47, and the Spurs have 21 games left. So that is another one that's getting pretty close to the line there. Really, Chet is way over the line with 55 played and 19 left now. To me, I think this is an absolute wash, assuming that Wembanyama does make it over. I think he's played in like a good stretch of games now as well. So hoping that he stays healthy going into the back end of the season. And if he is, Drew, then I just don't see any way in which he doesn't win this award. I think it was a little bit closer between him and Chet last season. I'm really enjoying that rivalry sort of building up more and more. And listen, Chet has had a great season. It's not to take anything away from Chet. I just think Wemby is the defender in the NBA, the single defender in the NBA who I think changes the most when he is on the court. That gravity of defense is like something I don't think we've ever seen before. Really, you can block guys on the 3-point line. It's not just paint protection from Wemby. So I would be handing him this award, assuming he does make it over that 65 game threshold.
And I'll just play devil's advocate because I would argue and say, well, you have a one of the best defenders on the best defensive team, and he's the anchor of a championship caliber team and defense. I love the fact that he can switch. I love his weak side ability. I love his IQ. So if Wemby were to get injured and miss these games, it wouldn't be a bad shout to give it to Chet. But however, it's how you see this award because, are we talking about impact or are we talking about defensive team success? And it's subjective how people see this. For me, defense is two things. It's when the game is on the line, can you match up Wemby or Chet against that guy and tell him who doesn't score, right? Who would you have more confidence in? Definitely, I got to go with Wemby. And also, can you do all of those things within the team defensive philosophy, right? Which we've seen Wemby does as well. You could look at Wemby and say his blocks are down from last year, but then I will also and then turn around and say that, he is altering paint touches. Guys aren't going in there. So, he's being robbed of numbers just because guys, when he is in the court, they are avoiding the paint. I mean, with him on the floor, they would have, if he played all 48 minutes, they would have the best defensive rating in the NBA. When he goes out the game, they drop to league average, their defense. So, you have to go with Wemby for this war without a shadow of a doubt. He is just incredible what he can do on that end. And I know what it's like to have a guy back there because it's a complete impact on everyone else because from the guard's perspective, you can be a little bit more aggressive on your man. You could be a little bit more greedy and going for steals because you have someone back there who can erase mistakes, which you have in Wemby. So there's a whole impact that Wemby creates that I'm not sure Chet creates that same type of impact where he scares guys to go in there, whereas Wemby, you can see their eyes get big and they'll do the little Chris Paul dribble in and just dribble back out of the paint. So definitely going with Wemby.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair in all of that. For context, these are sort of odds-on favourites for the awards at the moment, or at least the two sort of closest contenders. The last one in terms of that 65-game cutoff is MIP, Drew, which is looking for the bookmakers like it's between Jalen Johnson and Jalen Duren, a battle of the Jalens there. Neither of these two guys are particularly close to the cutoff unless there's a sort of dramatic injury coming in touch wood. That's not the case. Jalen Johnson has 55 played with 20 games left for the Atlanta Hawks. Jalen Duren with 50 played and 22 left for the Detroit Pistons. So for me, I would be giving this award to Jalen Johnson. I think it's tough because it kind of goes against what I was saying before in terms of it being a regular season award. For me, this is the one that's about individual improvement, even though it is a regular season award and it's about the role that you have on a team. Like Jalen Duren is a brilliant second option on the best team in the East, and I will absolutely not take that away from him. But Jalen Johnson has gone from a guy who was just kind of in the background with Atlanta when Trae Young was the main guy to the best player on that team, the guy who's leading the team, and the guy who's leading the team into the play-in tournament. I think that does mean something to me.
Absolutely. And again, you can argue Jalen Duren because he's an all-star, the best five man in the Eastern Conference. You could argue he's completely consistent. He dominates the paint inside defensively, and you can see his evolution offensively. He went to a drop off guy to someone who can finish around the rim to where now a lot of times Detroit would throw it to him at the free throw line in space and have him go to work. He can hit, he pops a lot more now. That three ball, we're not quite there yet. So he's just consistently gone on this trajectory, but he's always had this opportunity, right? He's always been the second option for Detroit. I just think that it's all coming together for him. Whereas when you look at Jalen Johnson and how I view this Most Improved award is that um, what do you do with a bigger role, right? And Jalen Johnson, he's always had these skills, but he's worked on it to a different level in the offseason to prepare for his moment where he's been able to pounce on it. And he is just taken off like a rocket. So this is where I see the separator with the two, whereas Jalen Duren has always had this opportunity. And now he has 2 or 3 years of experience playing with a bigger role. So he goes into the offseason knowing exactly what he needs to work on to be able to be better at his position. Whereas Jalen Johnson, he comes into the offseason preparing to be a role player, right? But that's a lot saying to him that he's worked on his number one option skills as well, because soon as Trey Young goes down, he's able to step into that role. So I'm going with Jalen Johnson on this just for the fact that he is shown right away what he can do with a bigger role, whereas Jalen Duran has just been a really slow climb.
Yeah, and I guess it's tricky because there are some mitigating factors on both sides really. Like Jalen Johnson is injured for a lot of last season, so doesn't see much time. So if it's on like a season by season improvement basis, some people might argue, well, he would have been as good last season with his 18.9 over 36 games if he'd have played more games over the course of the season. So maybe that doesn't make him a deserve. And it feels like it comes back to that rookie of the year argument, Drew. It feels like we're back in the Donovan Mitchell wearing the shirt, like defining what a rookie is and stuff like that with Ben Simmons. Like that, I remember back to those days vividly now. But for Jalen Duren, like some people may then also point to as the kind of counter argument to that while Jalen Duren's scoring has gone up, his rebounds are roughly the same, his assists have fallen, his steals and blocks have fallen. So has he overall become a worse all round player just to become a better offensive player? I mean, I will leave that up to the people who I'm sure will argue about this one over Twitter. I think for mine and Drew's money, we've both got Jalen Johnson taking that one there. Rookie of the year is much more interesting, Drew. I remember you making a bold prediction earlier in the season regarding Con Canepa and him winning Rookie of the Month and things like that, and that came true in the end. He's currently favourite for Rookie of the Year with a couple of bookmakers, which is interesting. It is close between him and Cooper Flagg. This is another one where, at risk of being a hypocrite again, I'm going to bring regular season record into it. And I know people will say I probably shouldn't come into play with Rookie of the Year, but part of the reason I want to is because earlier in the season for me, the Dallas Mavericks were not only a bad team, but Cooper Flagg was not having an impact on that bad team. They're still a bad team now in the sense of they've bought into their youth and traded away Anthony Davis and stuff, and Cooper Flagg is a great player on that bad team in the same way that Jalen Johnson was a great player on a bad team for a little while, a team that albeit have now improved. Con Canepa, the Hornets had a bad start to the season. He was still looking like he was on track to break records in terms of 3 points and stuff there. It's now not just a rookie record for me with Con Canepa. This is genuinely one of the best shooting seasons of all time that we're seeing. And I think that deserves to be rewarded. And I think the Charlotte Hornets and their record deserves to be rewarded with Con Canepa here. I would argue that Con Canepa is making a bigger impact on a good team than Cooper Flagg has made over the course of the whole season on a bad team. How do you feel about that, Drew?
Yeah, this one is tricky because it's very subjective in how you look at it. Because if you're looking at who's helping their team win right now, Con Canepa. Who is more polished right now? Con Canepa, right? And he's uplifted the guys around him. I talked about this on here before that he woke a lot of those young guys up. He woke LaMelo up. He woke a few of those guys up to say, hey, I better step my game up because today it's about me, but tomorrow it may not be about me. That's how the NBA works. And so he's uplifted that whole organization. And there's a different type of, um, people are looking at Charlotte differently. You could just look last night, like it was a sellout. Obviously, they were coming to watch Con Kneppel and Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag didn't play, but all of a sudden, there's momentum around Charlotte. There's a positive buzz, right? He's gotten rid of the embarrassment narrative. You look on the other side with Cooper Flag. He's still developing. He's still young. He should be a freshman in college right now. You see the flashes of what he could be, which they're a whole different level of what Con Kneppel will ever be in the NBA. And you know what this argument reminds me of, Josh? Of the same rookie of the year conversation we had in 2003, 2004, when it was LeBron and Carmelo. Carmelo was Con Kneppel. His team was better. He was more polished. They were winning more, and you could slam dunk the decision with Carmelo. However, the flashes was and it got you out your seats with LeBron James. And that's ultimately why he won this award. And I could see the same thing happening with Cooper Flag.
Yeah, I'll tell you one organisation or team that this does reflect very well, and that's the Duke Blue Devils, because
Man.
having two Duke Blue Devils in that conversation, having them both be, such great NBA players in their first season in the league, shout out to that Duke program for producing those two guys, because they are both having incredible seasons. It takes absolutely nothing away. Whoever loses or comes second in these awards, like that is still recognition to me of great seasons for all of these categories that we've listed so far. And onto a sort of lesser spotted one, I think these days, Drew, something that used to, I mean, maybe it meant more to me because there's a lot of Clippers who've won this award in the past, but it used to certainly mean more to me. And I've been a big advocate of the Six Man of the Year award and talked about how, one of the sort of six men I love the most who is in contention for this award is Naz Reid, because Naz Reid is a guy who gets paid like a starter, but is a sixth man and comes off the bench and closes games occasionally for the Minnesota Timberwolves and does all the things that like you expect a sixth man to be able to do. It just so happens that his style is more suited to the bench lineup. It's what I've been saying about Jonathan Kuminga a lot this season. People worrying about the kind of how do him and Jalen Johnson blend. Well, I think Kuminga, depending on what he does get paid in the off season, could be a great six man candidate for the Atlanta Hawks in the future if you keep him and Jalen Johnson's minutes a little bit staggered. But we'll leave Jalen Johnson because we already had the conversation about him. This Sixth Man of the Year award is actually between Naz Reid and Keldon Johnson this season, Drew. And I've loved what Keldon Johnson has done over the course of the season, to be honest. He's been a player I've been really, really impressed with, in the sense that, like, one of the interesting things about rebuilding teams is every time they draft a guy, like the Spurs drafted Keldon Johnson once upon a time, because of how high you draft a player, they're probably expected to like come into the league and be like the guy. And actually what happens more often than not is a lot of these guys just kind of settle into being a really good role player or a really good NBA player, while other guys end up being the stars. And that's kind of what's happened with Keldon Johnson, really. I know he comes at the end of the first round for the San Antonio Spurs, so not necessarily selected high, but it felt like that first season in the NBA in particular, hopes were really high for Keldon Johnson, and San Antonio Spurs fans were loving the production that he was able to give. And then there's been a lot of kind of figuring out of those roles for guys like him on the team over the last few years. This season it's been a role that's come off the bench, and for me he's really, really impressed. And like Naz Reid, as I say, is like that prototypical sixth man guy. I think I really like the improvement that I've seen in Keldon Johnson into finding a sixth man role, and that's why I'm like, there's a hair's width between it for me, but I'm probably erring towards Keldon Johnson on this one. How do you feel?
I'm going with Keldon Johnson just for the last sentence you just stated there, is that Keldon Johnson has used this year to carve out a role for himself on a very, very talented and young roster. He's been able to maneuver all of that. When you got pride, you look at your draft status, and a lot of times it's easy to just sit there and pout. But he is definitely turned himself into a game changer. And when I look at these two players, that's what it is for me. Again, it's the eye test. It's not about trying to break down these numbers. Is when I watch a Timberwolf game and when I watch a San Antonio game, which player pops off my screen? And every time I watch a San Antonio Spurs game is Keldon Johnson, because his aggressiveness just pops off. He changes the game. He's a game changer when you throw him in the mix. And Nas Reed, he's already been a six man before. He knows his role. He's comfortable with this role. He goes into the offseason knowing exactly what to work on. It's very difficult when you're not sure what type of role you're going to have in the offseason and what exactly to lock in on and what to focus on from a skill development standpoint. And because Keldon Johnson has discovered that, whereas Jeremy Sohan was not able to, and he was a higher draft pick than Keldon Johnson. This is
Yep.
why the award has to go to Keldon Johnson for me. Nas Reed has a monumental contract, getting paid like a starter. He could easily be a starter. He brings instant offense. He spreads the floor with his shooting ability, and he does a lot of great things. He's efficient, but at the end of the day, a six man to me is a game changer. When you put them in the game changes and they pops off your screen. And Keldon Johnson has been there all season long, and the Spurs have been consistently there in the top four all year.
Yeah, and I mentioned it as a regular season award, but I'm particularly interested to see what these two guys do in the playoffs. That's when I think Naz Reid's like kind of contract really comes into its own, really like where he really earns
Fair.
his money for me, because there's a lot of times, I've literally seen it as a Clippers fan in the series before where you can play Rudy Gobert off the floor because he hates being out on the perimeter. So you've got a lot of teams that play five out right now, and that's how you drag Rudy Gobert out of his comfort zone. And once you do, he's not got the foot speed to get back to it. Whereas, the Minnesota Timberwolves can mix it up and play Naz Reid as the five, stretch the floor, be a little bit more versatile in terms of defense as well. And he has been a good defender this season with a block and a steal per game. So big fan of Naz Reid's game. Again, like none of this is to be, reductive to any of these guys. But I think, me and Drew in agreement there that Keldon Johnson has had the more impressive season in terms of those sixth man stakes. But we'll round off, Drew, with the first 3-horse race of all of these. Like looking at the odds, it always felt like there was a big jump from second to third. There obviously are other guys who come into contention. I mentioned that Cade's odds have kind of shortened over the last few weeks for MVP because of Shea being a little bit sort of uncertain with injury because of how close Jokic is to that 65 game line. But Coach of the Year, there are 3 contenders in terms of what the odds think, and it's JB Bickerstaff, Joe Mazzulla, and Mitch Johnson. And my pick for this, Drew, might be a little bit sort of out of left field. I think it's obviously one of these 3 guys, so not completely out of left field in that sense, but I love what JB Bickerstaff and Mitch Johnson have been able to do this season in terms of taking teams who were not great teams last season on to be even better teams this season. But we kind of already saw that happening for both the Pistons and the Spurs, really. Like, Wemby is a generational talent. Cade is such a good talent. That Detroit Pistons roster is filled with great talents. We've mentioned, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's filled with great talents. That Spurs team, obviously a couple of rookies that Mitch Johnson had to, fine-tune there too, but they're 2, like, brilliant rookies for my money. So I kind of don't necessarily look at those 2 as the ones who are leading for me. Like, Joe Mazzulla has turned genuine like G League guys in the Mace Cater into really solid NBA role players, turned Peyton Pritchard into a starter who I know has gone back into the bench lineup recently since Nikola Vucevic arrived, but like was a guy who was a starting point guard and didn't look any bit like he wasn't a starting point guard. And I think a lot of that is testament to Joe Mazzulla and his coaching staff. And like, if you think about where preseason expectations were, I think they were a lot lower for the Boston Celtics than they were for the San Antonio Spurs and the Detroit Pistons. And in that sense, I kind of want to give Joe Mazzulla his flowers here with his Coach of the Year award. Yes, he is an elite coach, and we know that. And sometimes it's nice to like give it to the guys who maybe we didn't necessarily think were elite, and they've put themselves in that elite bracket, almost like a most improved coach award. But Joe Mazzulla, for the preseason expectations, for how much none of us believed the Boston Celtics would be a good team this season. And again, like obviously it's just my opinion and my prediction, but Boston for me are now the favourites to come out of the East, and so much of that is down to what Joe Mazzulla has been able to get out of this team.
Tough category. You can argue
Very.
for all 3 guys, but decisions got to be made. We got to put on our big boy pants. So right away, I can cut Mitch Johnson out of the conversation because you have Wemby, a generational superstar. Obviously, it's tough coaching talent. It's tough maneuvering through so many young, talented guys, and he's just pushed every right button. So you got to give him his props. Now it comes down to Mazzulla and Bickerstaff. And Mazzulla, as you just mentioned, everything. What is Coach of the Year? He's coached them up. You said he's brought a lot of G Leaguers to the party. He's coached them up. That's what coaching is about. You could definitely give him the award today. Bickerstaff, again, Detroit has an identity and they have a culture. He's coached them up. That's what a coach is supposed to do. So both of these guys have a huge impact on their team. With Bickerstaff, with them being number one and just really overachieving with this roster, which I feel is not really that talented when you look at a lot of the top teams around the league. For that reason, there is why I'm leaning towards him. But this award is far from being decided. Like, this is going to come down to the wire. But if I had to choose today, I got to go with Bickerstaff because remember what happened. He was brought in to replace a guy who had one of the biggest coaching contracts in history. And they just ripped up the contract and paid him $80 million to go away. To bring in you are the chosen one. So to be able to do that with an organization that once lost 28 games in a row, and all of a sudden you have your young superstar in the MVP conversation, you got your team as the number one seed, you got them as in the championship conversation. For that reason, I got to go with Bickerstaff.
Yeah, it is interesting and very, very close, as you say. And all of these awards are kind of close, really. And obviously some of those may come back to that 65-game cut-off conversation, but it'd be really interesting to see how the rest of the season shapes up. I just keep looking at that playoff picture. Like, I absolutely love a bracket come March time. I'm all for that. I'm all for the NBA getting right into bracket games as well. So loads to be excited about over the next few weeks and months, whatever's left of the NBA season now. Playoffs begin on the 18th of April, so just about 6 weeks left for us to get all the tasty action that is remaining in this regular season. We're not going to do understated stories and bold predictions this week. Me and Drew came, as I say, some technical issues yesterday and then a little bit underprepared in that sense into today's one, so we're going to leave it for this week. But we will talk about our bold predictions from last week. Drew, you may have to refresh my memory a little bit on yours, but mine was that the Denver Nuggets would go 0-3 over the course of the week. They fell at the first hurdle for me, cleared the first hurdle for them by beating the Boston Celtics on the night of the day we recorded. So it felt like they did that to spite me and then still went and lost the next two games. Again, expressing all the concerns that I have about the Denver Nuggets this season, really, from someone who I thought could be a real contender. There's now maybe one or too many asterisks there for me. Drew, yours was to do with the Lakers, am I right in thinking?
Yeah, I mentioned that, their schedule were the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, the Sacramento Kings, and the New Orleans Pelicans. I asked you what do you predict their record to be? You said 3-1. I said exactly. And I predicted that they would go 1-3. And similar to your bold prediction, they got off to the right start. They lost to the Phoenix Suns, which was an embarrassing loss with no Devin Booker, no Jalen Green, none of their big guys. And then they go on to win 3 in a row. So took care of business against Golden State, Sacramento, and Pelicans. So it was a shot in the dark, but it was a willing work to take. And the narratives changed very quickly in the NBA. One day, after the Phoenix Suns, the whole national NBA media was writing off the Lakers, and now all of a sudden, back on that momentum train again.
Yeah, Drew, we might have to send this to the replay center in Secaucus because I think I'm right in thinking that you made me make a prediction within your bold prediction, and then my prediction within your bold prediction came right. So I'm wondering if we head to the final scores at the end of the season. Can I count that one maybe? Is that like a 1 pointer rather than a 2 pointer? Can I go to the free throw line to make one, shoot two to make one? We'll leave it up to the replay center.
We'll give you a point. We'll give you a point. But I get a half a point for the assist because I just threw the ball. I threw the ball up to the rim. All you had to do was jump and do this. So well done, my man.
Yeah, I need to claim any bold prediction success I can get because it's not been a successful season for me on the bold prediction. But a successful season for us on Crossover the Pond continues. We're really enjoying being on this NBA basketball journey with you guys. Thank you so much to everyone who has been supporting us. Let me and Drew know in person that you have been watching. I did a podcast last week with a guy called Nathan Doyle as well, who was from Newcastle. Shouted out Drew as one of Newcastle's own, as a Newcastle Eagles legend. And it was good fun to chop it up with Nathan and talk about the NBA on the Brits Don't Jump podcast. So if you're listening to this, do go and give that a listen with Nathan as well. That was really good fun and had some good feedback off that as well. So hopefully a few extra listeners to our podcast this week. We're going to keep building, keep trying to find cool interviews and people to speak to for you guys as well. But before we do that, the only thing that's left for me to do on this episode is to say, Drew, lead us out.
Yeah, we appreciate every single one of you. I see the likes slowly starting to creep up there on YouTube, slowly but surely. We know Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're just going to continue to be consistent and, you build it and they will come. So we will always be here. Just make sure you buckle up, get on the train, because we're going to take you all the way through to the NBA Finals here on the Crossover with myself, Josh Sexton. We will see you guys next week. Peace out.